Okay, so
Hello.
hi, how are you? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Good. So far, so good. Okay, so this is where people, sorry, Ron, I'm just talking to Kevin because this is my first time here. Yeah.
Hi,
Yes.
Ellie, Anita, and Nadia, and
Oh,
Casper.
hi,
They're on
Anita.
the line.
Hello. Hi, Casper. Hi, Nadia.
Oh, Casper may not be there, but Nadia is.
Okay.
Hi.
Oh, I see. Okay, gotcha.
He will be
So-
joining. Sorry, just
Okay.
not quite yet.
You're recording right now.
Okay, beautiful. And I want to go. So
everybody's mute right now.
everybody's
Except
mute.
Counselor
Ron,
Cynthia.
and that's okay.
But
Carl is mute. Yeah, Nadia is mute. Okay, beautiful.
when they want to speak, they will have to unmute.
They will do it themselves. Okay, beautiful.
You good?
Yeah, I'm good.
Okay.
Everybody's coming in. Yeah. Thank you. Thanks, Kevin. Hi, Dana. Nadia, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. I'm wondering if I should make you co-host with Casper and Anita right now. So when you're ready to present, you could just then what do you think?
Ellie, I'll be sharing my screen with the presentation. So as
Oh,
long as you've made me a co-host or co-presenter.
okay.
that
So
should
I
be
could just make you now co-host.
Sure.
Okay. Um, okay, hold on. Yeah. Participant share at a time. Okay. Participant.
Nadia, you sounded a bit faint. I don't know if it's your mic.
Okay, I turned up my volume. Is that better?
A little bit louder if you could too. Nadia, I can hear you, but also not
I'll
too
go get my headset. I just thought I'd give my
loud.
ears.
Okay. Thanks.
Yeah, well, okay, I'll be right back.
Okay, thank you. So Anita, I'm trying to see where I can make you co-host and now it's not showing up. So let's see here.
Try under my picture. There's 3 dots.
Under your pictures, there's 3 dots. Okay.
If you sort of hover your mouse on top of my picture,
Yeah.
there should be a mute and three ellipses. If you click on those, you should be able to make me the co-presenter. Or in the participants list, you
Okay.
might also be able to make me presenter.
Okay. Anita, more. And I'll go make co-host.
That's right.
Beautiful. Yes.
How's this
Okay.
now? Is that better?
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Yes, much better.
Okay.
I can share my screen now, so
Thank
I
you.
guess you'll let me know when the
Yep.
time comes.
Okay, thank you. So we're getting our little winter wonderland.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
think
I
we're all buried. We have not dug out yet.
Oh my goodness.
I actually went outside just before the meeting just to get some fresh air, and
Yeah.
I didn't realize how much snow had fallen. So
Is it snowing up there?
yeah,
Oh,
it
it's
has
snowing
not
here, I
stopped.
know. I said, I'm not driving home till that driveway's done, but it's done now. So I told him, I said, why didn't you do the driveway this morning? And he didn't. And I went, I felt like Mario Andretti trying to get down there. It just happens to be a farm driveway. That's why.
Mm, I know. I
Anyway.
feel like we got all the snow that we were supposed to have over the winter in one
That's what
day.
we
So
said.
I'm like,
Did
why
you-
did we pay for snow removal service? And I'm like, oh yeah, it's for today.
And you got all our questions, and thanks, Ron, for your questions. And it was we got a lot of things today, and we tried to answer best we could. So I'm hoping you guys can take a look at that stuff for me and
Can't hear though.
help me out a bit there.
Thanks
Yeah.
for your quick response.
But well, we tried, and we worked on the stuff Friday, and then we worked till 11 o'clock this morning on them. So it was lots of questions. So that's good.
Yeah, Mary, we've been tracking your emails, so I think what we'll do is over the next couple weeks as we get into the second draft, we will look at all of those one-on-one and provide responses where needed.
Yeah, I couldn't remember I saw it later, your GIS guy. I think the farm question should have gone to him, but
Oh, that's okay. Just send everything to the three of us. We'll
okay,
coordinate.
that's what I do, and okay, that's good. Because I was like, what's his name? Anyway.
Jeff. Not.
Jeff, I saw it. Jeff, no,
Yeah.
yeah, I saw it later. I went, that's who he is. Yeah.
They don't mind the GIS guy.
Yeah.
title.
They're very forgiving.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Everyone.
good humored people.
Yes, that's right.
Hi, Lee.
Keeps them undercover.
Yeah. Anyway.
Coming in. I can click on it. Mhm. Hi, Elaine.
I'm showing 7 o'clock. So is
almost.
everybody
Yeah,
here
7
that we're
o'clock.
expecting? Okay, good. So I'll call the meeting to order and welcome everybody and acknowledge that we're meeting on the traditional territory of the Mohawks of Akwesasne.
We have
And
quorum?
we do. We have everybody whom we expected, and we have quorum. I confirmed
Let's see
that with
here.
Billy. I think.
Just let me take another quick look, Elaine, please.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Just trying to see if there's more people. So we have 1, 2.
We have 6.
Okay, I'll take a look right now. 1, 2, 3, 4.
I count 7 with Amanda, but she's not showing.
Yeah, 7. And I do have Amanda in. She's just, her picture's not showing, but yeah.
I am here. I'm here.
Oh, hi, Amanda.
Yeah,
Okay.
good.
Hi, guys.
Hi.
Typically, what we do, Amanda, is staff who aren't part of the committee are shown by their name, but if you're on the committee, you show your face if you care to. We'd be glad to see you. That way, if you want to speak, you're less likely to get missed. I mean, to join us with video.
Yes, we've been told that we're not allowed to turn our camera off at council meetings. So I would assume that it's the same for
For PAC.
PAC meetings.
Yeah.
So that having
Okay,
been
let
said,
me figure it out, okay? I'm on
Okay.
my
Okay.
phone, so just give me a sec.
oh, okay.
Hopefully you're not driving.
No, no, I just got home. Just give me a sec.
I think if you don't have the ability,
Mhm.
it's fine, but
Oh, we have
we do miss your face.
Councillor
That's it.
Bennett just joined us. So I believe I've already called the meeting to order,
Order.
so I'll ask you to take attendance, please,
Oh.
PAC Secretary.
Thank you. So Mayor Bernadette Clément sent her regrets. Councillor Todd Bennett,
Present?
Councillor Éric Bergeron,
Present.
Councillor Maurice Dupel, Councillor Sid Gardner, Councillor Glenn Grant,
Present.
Councillor Caroline Hébert. Caroline?
Out.
Yep. Councillor Dean Hollingsworth,
Present.
Councillor Elaine McDonald,
Present.
Councillor Claude McIntosh,
Here.
Councillor Justin Towndale,
Present.
lay member Amanda Brisson,
Here,
lay member Ron Symington.
Present.
Thank you.
And thank you. Are there any conflicts of interest to be declared? Seeing none, we'll move on to the agenda. May I have a motion to accept it, please? Claude and Glenn, all in favor? Thank you. And a motion, please, to adopt the minutes of December 21st, 2020.
I'll make the motion.
And who was that who said that?
Ron.
And good, and seconded by, I think I saw 3 or 4 hands. Claude, you're all in favor? Thank you. And presentations. Would you introduce this, please? Where's Mary Joyce
Mary?
Smith? I
I'm
believe I
here.
saw her here.
Yeah,
Good.
thank you. Through you, Madam Chair, tonight we have a presentation by our consultant, WSP, and they are focusing on the first draft of our comprehensive zoning bylaw document. Now, PAC will recall that we had a presentation of the zoning strategy in September. So they've taken upon that and moved on to a first draft for zoning bylaw and map. I want PAC to understand that this is not the statutory public meeting, though, under section 34. That'll come later on in the process. So tonight we will just be asking for endorsement of the zoning bylaw and map, and then it'll be recommended that hopefully the same to council. And I would also tell, I'll go on, I guess, Madam Chair, I can explain also that we weren't required to have specific notice requirements for this presentation because, as I mentioned, it's a non-public meeting exercise tonight. So I'd like to introduce, I believe it's Nadia doing the presentation or tonight?
It'll be all 3 of us.
Yep.
Sorry, all 3 of you. Okay, thank you. You can go ahead.
Thank you, Marion. Good evening, Madam Chair and members of PAC. My name is Nadia DeSanti, and yes, I will be joined by Anita Sott and Casper Koblau, who will share the presentation. And I want to first off thank all of you for the comments that that you've sent forward already to date. And again, as Mary mentioned, this isn't a public meeting, but more of a meeting to answer questions, provide further comment, and I like to call it almost like a working session, but it's not a workshop. So your input will assist us in the next round. So so I'm leading the WSP consulting team, assisting the city in completing the review and preparing the new comprehensive zoning bylaw. As Mary mentioned, we presented to PAC on our zoning strategy, which zoning strategy report, excuse me, which contained recommendations that have formed the foundations for the first draft zoning bylaw that we'll be presenting to you tonight. We hope that everyone has had the opportunity to review the first draft, and if you haven't had a chance yet, we encourage you to do so and provide your feedback with us to help refine the bylaw as we prepare the second draft. Great, thanks. So this slide is just basically the key topics that we're going to cover. We'll just go over the zoning bylaw review process and then provide an overview of the first draft, including the general structure and various sections. We will then discuss key changes that we've made in the first draft zoning bylaw and share where to find information on how key zoning issues that were discussed at the last PAC meeting have been addressed. It's been a while. It's been a few months. Lastly, we will explain how members of the public can share their input and discuss recent and ongoing community engagement initiatives, as well as next steps in the process. This slide provides a snapshot of where we are in the comprehensive zoning bylaw review process. To date, we've completed all background report. We've prepared this first draft. We also have an online public open house, an online survey, and we've extended the survey to the end of this Friday, just to help with, maybe providing a little bit more opportunity for people to review. Was the long weekend, and we have received some comments, but thought we'd give an extra week. Tonight's meeting is the second of 4 PAC meetings in total, so we're moving along. The first draft will also be refined through 2 more drafts before being presented at the statutory public meeting, and then obviously back to council for adoption. So I think collectively, including the city and the TAC, I think we've shown that we can keep things moving in our virtual world, which is pretty incredible. I'm sure none of us thought we'd be doing this in school and in other work. So I think it's pretty informative and pretty incredible how we can continue to move on this process. So I'm going to turn it over to, I believe it's Anita.
It's
Oh,
me, Nadia,
Casper,
but thank
sorry.
you nonetheless.
We're all one team.
Yeah,
We
for
call
sure.
each other by our name, different names. So sorry, Casper, go ahead.
Yeah,
Thanks.
no problem. Okay, so I'm just going to provide a brief overview of the first draft zoning bylaw to start us out. So the first draft zoning bylaw has been prepared, as was mentioned, based on the recommendations in the zoning strategy report that was presented to the PAC in September 2020. So both the zoning strategy report and the first draft zoning bylaw, as well as the map, have been made available to the public through the city's website, and we've been receiving comments throughout the process and taking note of those and refining as required. So the first draft zoning bylaw is made up of 5 basic sections. Section 1, administration and interpretation, describes how the zoning bylaw is implemented by the city. The section contains information on how the zoning bylaw provisions and the zoning map should be read and interpreted. Section 2 is definitions. It's a very important section containing definitions for all permitted uses, as well as other key terms used in the zoning bylaw. Our draft also includes illustrations intended to help clarify some of those definitions. Section 3 is general provisions, and that contains provisions that typically apply to all properties in all zones, depending on the proposed development. For example, this section includes provisions related to accessory buildings as well as parking requirements. Sections 4 to 29 contain provisions for the individual zones that make up the entire city. So there's 26 of these zones, and they're organized by land use type, for example, residential, commercial, employment, and open space. Each one of these zones has its own provisions, and these include the permitted uses, the standards such as minimum lot area, setback, and maximum building heights, Additional provisions such as special provisions for specific uses in that zone and exception zones, which contain specific provisions that apply to a specific property. And lastly, the zoning map, which I will speak to, I think, on the next slide. So the zoning map is section 5 of the bylaw, and it illustrates the proposed, at this point, zoning on all properties in the city, as you can see. So the zone boundaries are in pink in the zoning. You can't really see that, but trust me, they're there. So the legend lists the zone acronyms used in the map. For example, Res 10 means residential 10 zone. CG means general commercial zone. The zoning bylaw map has been finalized and approved by council. At the end of this process, the zoning map will be converted to an interactive map on the city's website and will replace the mapping which is currently on the website.
Okay, so over to me. My name is Anita Sott. Nice to see everyone again. The next 2 slides will be discussing how to navigate the new zoning bylaw document, because as Casper mentioned, it has been somewhat restructured from the existing bylaw dating back to 1969. So as part of public open house number 3, which is being held online, and I'll get to a little bit later on, we also wanted to walk members of the public and residents through the bylaw in a way that would allow them to find the provisions that are applicable to their property. So we'd like to do the same with PAC this evening. So step 1 is to find your property of interest on the zoning map, which Casper just spoke to, and use the map legend to determine what zone your property is in. So for example, on the slide, if you lived on this property circled in red, there's a Res 20 label on the zoning map, which means that you would be in the residential 20 zone, and you would go to that section of the bylaw as a starting point to see what types of uses and development standards apply in the residential 20 zone. So step 2 would be to, as I mentioned, go to that zone. So again, it's sections 4 through 29 are the various zones in the city, and you would see what you could build essentially on your property, or how you could redevelop your property in terms of minimum setbacks, maximum building heights, lot area, and other types of provisions. Step 3 would be to refer to section 2 of the bylaw definitions to help clarify the meaning of a permitted use that is listed under the applicable zone, or other key zoning terms that are used in the bylaw. So for example, if a user was unsure how to interpret required side yard setbacks, they could go to the definitions section and look up the side yard definition. And in this case, it also includes an illustration to help readers understand where a yard or a required yard is found on a typical building lot. And step 4 is to review the entirety of section 3 general provisions in the zoning bylaw document. And these are provisions that apply to any property in the city or a proposed development. So for example, your parking requirements are found in that section and specify the number of parking spaces that must be provided depending on what use you're looking to develop. And that is also where your accessory structure provisions are found. So if a resident is interested in building a shed or a detached garage, for example, they would need to read the general provisions for accessory uses. The next few slides will describe some of the key changes and what we hope are considered to be improvements that we've made in the first draft zoning bylaw. So as we mentioned, the city's current zoning bylaw that is in effect dates back to 1969, and there have been many amendments that have been made over those years, which have resulted in the need for some improved organization of the document and the zoning provisions. So the first draft zoning bylaw includes a number of new organizational features to help users navigate the document, and I'll describe some of them. So as shown with the number 1 icon, the sections of the zoning bylaw have been color-coded with alternating blue and green headers that identify both the section title in the top right corner and a zone icon. that sort of represents visually the general types of uses that are permitted in that zone. And as shown in number 2, each zone section also now begins with some preamble text, and that text explains the intent of the zone and its relationship to the city's official plan and those land use designations in the official plan and what types of development are generally permitted. As shown in number 3 on the slide, permitted uses are now organized in a bulleted list and they're presented in alphabetical order. The terms used to describe the permitted uses have also been somewhat simplified and grouped, like similar uses have been grouped under one broader term in some cases. As shown in number 4, we've grouped the zone standards for development in organized tables, and we've used metric system measurements consistently. And lastly, as shown in number 5, each zone has a section titled exception zones, where site-specific exceptions which only apply to specific properties in the city under that zone are organized, and they will also be numbered on the zoning map. So you may see something like Res 20 and then a dash and a number. And eventually in the second draft zoning bylaw, you'll be able to look for that code under the exception zones to find the exception provisions for a specific property. Section 2, the definition section of the zoning bylaw has also been revised to expand on the different terms that are used in the bylaw and to delete or replace outdated definitions. So every permitted use that I just described under the zones now has a corresponding definition. Similar permitted uses have been grouped under simplified single terms. So an example of this is the existing bylaw permits various different types of stores and shops. And now we've simplified that to be under the term retail store. Some definitions have also had illustrations included to help the reader understand their meaning. So for example, the definitions include explanations and illustrations of different dwelling types. And in this case on the slide, we're showing the image for a duplex dwelling. Section 3, general provisions, also includes illustrations to help the reader interpret certain zoning provisions that may be somewhat complicated. So for example, as we're illustrating on the slide and is included in the zoning bylaw document under the general provisions for parking, we've illustrated where you cannot park a vehicle in a required front yard. So I'll turn it back over to Casper at this point.
Thanks, Nita. So I'm going to talk a little bit now about zones themselves. So the city's current in effect zoning bylaw from 1969 contains 32 zones. Our first draft zoning bylaw contains 26 proposed zones. So some of the existing zones that exist have been deleted or consolidated based on recommendations in the zoning strategy report. So these changes are outlined in the table on this slide. So the commercial 42 zone has been deleted as it is not currently in use for any property. The special uses 99 zone, which only applies to one property, has been deleted, and that property has become a site-specific exception to the rural zone. Several commercial and manufacturing zones have been consolidated as they contain similar permitted uses and development standards. 10 other zones have been renamed to simplify the city's zone structure, and 13 other zones have been maintained more or less as is.
Think. Can you hear me? You're lost.
Okay. Sorry, I lost audio there for a second, but I think I'm good now. So on to maximum building heights. So the city's in effect zoning bylaw regulates building heights in a variety of different ways. So for example, general provision 1 to 10, which limits building height to 90 feet or approximately 27.5 or 8 stories across the city. There's also sections of the zoning bylaw, the in effect zoning bylaw, which use the concept of angular planes to regulate height. So for clarity, in the first draft zoning bylaw, Each zone has been updated with a maximum building height standard that is intended to be appropriate for the types of uses permitted in that zone. In addition, the definition of building height has been updated with an illustration that shows how building height is measured depending on different building roof types. For those zones in the city's existing zoning bylaw which do not have a specific maximum building height, our approach to recommending an appropriate height was largely based on a review of typical building heights located on key corridors within that zone. Including specific maximum building heights in each zone is intended to reflect the typical appropriate heights for the types of permitted uses in a given zone, as well as its context within the city. The proposed maximum building heights are not intended in any way to hinder development potential in the city. The maximum building heights proposed in the first draft zoning bylaw are being specifically reviewed by city staff, and we're seeking feedback from you, the PAC, as well as from members of the public and property owners to determine where any adjustments may be required. So I'm going to speak a little bit about accessory uses, buildings, and structures. So for context, the city's current in effect zoning bylaw contains general provisions for accessory uses, buildings, and structures, as well as other provisions under each zone. Some existing provisions are inconsistent, such as maximum building height for structures across different zones. For clarity, the first draft zoning bylaw consolidates all provisions for accessory uses, buildings, and structures under section 3.1 and organizes key provisions in a table, such as maximum building height, size, number of accessory buildings permitted on a lot, and minimum setbacks. Another key change that we'd like to discuss has to do with additional residential uses. So this was something that was discussed quite a bit at the previous PAC meeting in September 2020 and in the zoning strategy report. So this slide discusses how additional residential units have been addressed in our first draft. So just for context, additional residential units are self-contained residential units with a private kitchen, bathroom facilities, and sleeping areas. They are required to be permitted by municipalities per the Planning Act. A new section has been added under general provisions in the first draft zoning bylaw with provisions to regulate additional residential units. As required by the Planning Act, these units are permitted in all detached, semi-detached, and row houses and buildings or structures ancillary to these housing types where adequate service provisions are available. So ancillary in this context means structures that are secondary and complementary to dwelling or building. So for example, a detached garage. So what this essentially means is that 2 additional residential units other than the main unit are permitted on a lot. All additional residential units require a building permit, and they must comply with the Ontario Building Code, the Fire Code, the zoning bylaw, of course, and other city bylaws such as the Property Standards Bylaw. In addition, each residential unit on a lot requires a dedicated parking space. This parking space may be provided through tandem parking, which essentially means one car parked behind the other. Another key issue that we've addressed through the first draft zoning bylaw is that of community gardens, which are generally defined as community-based and managed spaces for gardening and for small-scale cultivation of fruits, vegetables, herbs, and other plants for personal use or consumption. Community gardens can provide a range of benefits to residents related to physical, mental health, social interaction, and food security. They can also help to beautify communities and provide environmental benefits such as supporting urban pollinator populations. In the first draft zoning bylaw, community gardens are permitted on public and private lands in all residential, commercial, institutional, open space, and rural zones. They're also permitted in employment zones, subject to minimum distance requirements from industrial uses. The first draft zoning bylaw also contains provisions to restrict the location of community gardens on lands in floodplains and within close proximity to water bodies, stormwater management facilities, and provincially significant wetlands, in order to avoid potential impacts on these features. So I'll let Anita continue to speak to some of the key zoning issues addressed.
Okay, thanks, Casper. So at the previous PAC meeting and as part of our zoning strategy report discussion, we did raise the issue of tiny homes, which, as a reminder, are small, private, and self-contained dwelling units with living and dining areas, kitchen and bathroom facilities, and sleeping areas, and they're intended for year-round use. They are not a seasonal dwelling or a temporary dwelling. So based on community input on tiny homes that we received through the online survey as part of the previous online public open house number 2 held in May of 2020, residents generally supported permitting tiny homes across the city. And at the previous PAC meeting, we explained that the city's current zoning bylaw does not require a minimum dwelling size in any zone. So this means that currently dwellings of any size, including a tiny home, could be permitted anywhere that a residential use is permitted, a single detached dwelling, provided that other zoning provisions are being met, such as minimum lot area and setbacks. So our first draft zoning bylaw maintains the city's current approach in the existing bylaw, and we have not introduced specific requirements for tiny homes. This is also consistent with the approach that many other municipalities are taking in their zoning bylaws to broadly allow for a variety of housing sizes in residential areas. And as a reminder, tiny homes, much like additional residential units, all require a building permit, and they must comply with the Ontario Building Code, Fire Code, the zoning bylaw, and other city bylaws like property standards. Another key issue in our strategy report, and one that we discussed with PAC in September, are pop-up shops, or what are termed in the zoning bylaw to be temporary sales uses. So these are temporary sales spaces or structures where various kinds of merchandise is sold, such as artisanal goods, food, or other retail items, and they often occur in conjunction with events, festivals, and farmers markets, for example. So the first draft zoning bylaw permits pop-up shops, or as they're called, temporary sales uses, subject to licensing requirements in a variety of locations. And the duration for those temporary sales uses is determined through the licensing process by the city. So the locations where temporary sales uses would be permitted has been expanded from what's currently provided in the zoning bylaw. And this is in order to maximize economic development opportunities and to complement the city's investment in the movable containers that have been purchased, which can be used in the future for the purpose of pop-up shops. The permitted duration, as I mentioned, of any temporary sales use would be determined on a case-by-case basis through the licensing agreement and process with the city. And as previously mentioned, the first draft zoning bylaw and the map has been made available on the city's website as of late January of this year, and an online public open house is currently underway. So that began February 1st, and it's been extended. It was originally ending February 14th, but as Nadia mentioned, we've extended it to this Friday, February 19th. And again, it has been held online, obviously due to COVID-19 protocols in place. So the online public open house has consisted of a narrated video presentation with a written transcript for accessibility. And there are display boards which provide more information on some of the zoning issues and how they've been addressed, and a detailed overview of the structure of the first draft bylaw. And there's currently an online survey available, which is the main avenue through which we're seeking to obtain public feedback. But it's made quite clear that any members of the public, residents, business owners, and certainly members of PAC can submit written comments or contact city staff, and those comments will be relayed back to us for the second draft zoning bylaw. So turning it over to Nadia now, I believe.
Thanks, Anita. So again, comments can be provided in English and French through the dedicated project email. Regular project updates will continue to be provided as the project moves forward, and the opportunity for the public to review engagement materials and reports as they become available. Future public open houses will be advertised on the project website, on the city's social media accounts, through newspaper notices, and in community bulletins at major city facilities. And finally, this slide outlines the immediate next steps in the zoning bylaw review. So we are asking for any further comments from PAC on the first draft. If you could provide them, by the end of the week, that would be great. So we can sort of wrap up this first draft. We will be preparing, and as we heard it, summary memo to document the online survey responses and input received on the first draft, which will be posted on the city's website. In the spring, we are going to have a second draft zoning bylaw that will be prepared to include any revisions required based on the feedback that we've received, and to add the site-specific exceptions to the document. Other aspects of the first draft zoning bylaw may also be refined. For example, on the map, we're going to show the zone boundaries in a different color, not pink, because it's pink is a difficult color to see. So we kind of saw that afterwards, but we will be changing that color, for example. The second draft zoning bylaw will be presented at a statutory public open house as required under the Planning Act.
Well, thank you, Nadia. And are you open to hearing some comments and possibly questions now as well?
Yes, yeah, we are.
Okay.
That's yeah.
I should say thank you to Anita and to Casper as well. So what I'd like to do, since we have a recommendation, I would like the recommendation to be moved and seconded, and then we'll open it for discussion and question, and we'll vote at the end of the discussion. So may I have a mover, please? And I can only see half of you on my screen, unless, can somebody take down the thank you, for which we're grateful, so that I can see everybody in case somebody does want to speak.
I'll move, Elaine. It's
Good.
Carrie.
Thank you. Thank you. So who said they'd move? Was that you, Carolyn? Yes. And seconded by Glenn Grant. So questions or comments, please, whichever you like. And perhaps you should direct them to one speaker if you like, or Nadia, do you want to sort out who should answer what questions?
Well, Madam Chair, I think if they're maybe directed first to Mary, and then we can,
Sure.
I can see Mary on the screen, and
okay,
so I think
you'll be the backup.
Yeah.
Okay, you'll have Mary's back. So,
yes, exactly.
Are there questions or suggestions or comments? Claude?
Couple of questions and observation. On page 29, when it comes to front yard parking,
as in not permitted?
yeah. Actually, what happens if you have a double driveway? That could be my house. I got tandem parking, probably enough room for 3 cars, but I got a double driveway that stops at 8 feet from my front steps. Actually, it's a front part of my front yard.
So your question to Mary is?
Is this grandfathered in, or am I illegal?
I think it used to say the bylaw used to, sorry, through you, Madam Chair. My understanding was the bylaw said that it would lead to the garage. So in those cases, if it was a double garage, the driveway could be that wide. I'm not aware, I don't know, Nadia, if that has been preserved in this bylaw or.
Sorry, I have to pull up the bylaw. I just have my laptop here. Anita, do you have that?
Yeah, I have that. I can speak to it. So,
okay, thanks. I need to pull it up.
Yeah, I think we had discussed that provision with city staff, and it resulted, or it had the potential to result in developments with, an endless width of garage space, and therefore very, very wide driveways, for example, like a triple car garage. And we had some discussions regarding, stormwater management and requirements for landscaping in front yards. So we have removed that provision that permits a driveway as wide as your garage, but we do allow for double driveway widths. So there is a maximum driveway width for standard residential driveways, and I think it would accommodate a double driveway, and anything wider than that would be a potential minor variance application for PAC's consideration.
Okay. The other question I have is when it comes to community gardens, what you permit. Could a person, marijuana is now legal in Ontario and every person's allowed to grow, I believe, 4 plants. Would that be allowed in a community garden?
No.
No, through you, Madam Chair. So that is under provincial and federal regulation. I believe it's 4 plants maximum per residential dwelling. And that would only be on private property. So that would not be permitted as part of a public community garden. And that
Okay.
would certainly be under the city's enforcement as well.
Yeah, okay, I get you. So it's for, it's a residential garden really when it comes down to, not a community garden. The other thing you had mentioned that when it comes to tiny homes, you didn't get much pushback from the public in your consultations. In fact, I think you said it seemed to be a good feel about it. I suspect that'll be great until one's built in your neighborhood, and then they'll be at City Hall complaining. But there's so many restrictions on these things with water, sewer, setbacks, the rest of it. It really restricts tiny homes, doesn't it? Not many properties in Cornwall, residential lots could accommodate a tiny house.
I think Mary
Mary?
wants to say something.
Sorry, I don't know. Just through you, Madam Chair, we've had a couple inquiries lately, and what's happened is they've been directed to the building department, because my understanding is that the OBC is quite restrictive in terms of these tiny homes. So as it stands right now, I think planning's interpretation on how we want to handle it probably is effective with respect to no minimums, but they do have to deal with permits. I don't know, Nadia, if you have anything to add.
Yeah, the only thing that I would like to add is, there could be some areas, in the more of the rural parts, perhaps, where, and I actually have a friend not in Cornwall, but they are living in a tiny home right now while the main home is being renovated. So I just learned that a couple of weeks ago. So that's, an option for people where they can, live in a tiny home on the property while their house might be under renovation. So you may see something like that in Cornwall, but there are, as we've presented, and there are, building code restrictions and other things that have to be met. So.
Okay, thanks. That's it.
You're welcome.
Yes, Todd Bennett. And then Dean.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks, Elaine. Through you, just to follow up on that. So, my understanding that the zoning bylaw says, yeah, you can have a tiny home. There's no restrictions. But then they're going to go over to the building to get a permit, and they're going to say, well, actually, yes, we do have restrictions. Like, are we going to have 2 departments with 2 different answers for people?
Through you, Madam Chair, my understanding, it was a surprise to us too, because we were trying to determine would they fit and how are we going to introduce them to the setbacks that we have in the bylaw now. But in discussions with the chief, I was advised that it's imperative that they do check with the OBC. And so at this point, I think like I said, I think our interpretation on how to handle it is the best we can do at this point because of the OBC.
Would it make sense, or is it possible to set aside a certain area, maybe in the city, that would permit tiny homes only? And then we could have like a subdivision of tiny homes so that they're not impeding on, say, Main Street, Riverdale, and trying to build a tiny home beside a 3,000 square foot house.
Through you, Madam Chair, I think that's been brought up. It's been suggested, but I don't personally myself, I haven't had the, what's the word I'm looking for? The amount of people interested in doing it. Like, these are one-offs that people are asking me about. So I don't know. You'd have to.
I think for us in the city of Cornwall, this is very, very new, but it's not new in your bigger centers. So I think we might want to wrap our head around that this is going to start eventually being something we need to really consider what to do with.
Now, I think, Mark, did you want to comment before we go to Dean?
Yes, if I may. I think really the greatest difference between what we have in this proposed bylaw and what we have in the existing bylaw is that we're actually speaking to the subject. So really nothing's changing very much in the sense that you were allowed to build small, tiny homes previously, but it wasn't actually a term that was commonly used. So you are allowed, for example, if you had a small lot, what used to be called a lot of record. So it may be a lot that was too small in frontage, too small in area, but you would have been permitted to build something on that lot as long as you met all other requirements of the bylaw. So as long as you've got a, you know, a 3 meters setback for your driveway and a 1.5 on the other side, which is largely a building code thing. So in other words, if you're meeting all the required setbacks, you can put a small house on a small lot. You could now, and you would with this bylaw. However, the difference, as I said, is that we're speaking to it now, while in before, you know, in the old bylaw, it didn't speak to it. And really, it's the only thing that regulates how small it can be is the building code.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. And Dean?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. One question on page 33 with regards to the maximum height chart. Okay, so page 33 of the report, maximum heights, residential, institutional, open space, no restrictions. So I can build an apartment building as tall as I want. Like if there's no restriction, I can, whatever I
Ms.
think
Smith?
I can afford.
Through you, Madam Chair, I think what happened is planning is, I think they mentioned that planning is going to look at certain areas of the city that maybe, because my understanding was we were talking about a 4-story restriction, which is too strong for some areas that already said, hey, look, I could have 90 feet, right? So now what has to happen is I think we have to back it up. And we have to look at the arterials especially. And I think they mentioned, Nadia or Anita mentioned tonight, staff is looking at that right now currently to see where is it more appropriate to allow more stories and where is it more appropriate, i.e. the waterfront sometimes those zones stipulate 4 stories. So we're trying to review that as well.
Okay, so we don't really have a number yet.
No, it's premature at this point.
Okay, so that being said, then I'm gonna go one over on the commercial bar, and it's a little muddied on our hard copy here, but commercial special uses zones. So that says 1 story. So that means that technically speaking, if that were in place, Cornwall Square would be in contravention of our bylaw, right?
Through you, Madam Chair, I think that if you look at the top of that page, it's kind of misconstrued because it's accessory uses and buildings and structures. So I don't think it's a true chart. Perhaps Nadia, you can help me out here, but that chart was taken from the accessory uses. So an accessory shed or something.
Yeah, and I was looking at the report as well, just right now in front of me. Give me a second here. And it's not really clear in the report on the first draft for sure. Now I'm kind of scrolling down. I couldn't find a clear page in the draft plan either that definitively says this is what's going on. So I guess as a guy that's not a real planner, maybe we need to make that a little cleaner so that if I decided I wanted to open a store tomorrow, I would know exactly how tall I can build my building. And if I'm building an apartment building on Pitt Street, corner of Pitt and Second. So if you're asking for feedback, I'm not a planner, so maybe I don't get it, but to me, it's very confusing. And I don't think it should be.
Go ahead, Mary Joyce.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, we were just looking at some of the zones in like Res 30 and whatever. And if you go, you see the maximum height per building. They're saying 10 meters and 11 and 13.
Yeah, even that 10 meters. Like, wow, really? That's all you're going to let me do is 10 meters?
That's
not a lot.
That's why I think planning has asked for just a rethink a little bit, because we think that 4 stories in some cases is not enough. So
well,
we want to redo this.
I mean, sure. And I guess I'll wait for the next crack at it.
Yeah.
But if you're looking for feedback, those
Mhm.
numbers are not working for me. Just saying.
Thank you. Now, Nadia, did you want to comment?
Yes, thank you, through you, Madam Chair. Just for clarification, so the maximum building heights are in each zone, and as Mary mentioned, we will review those as well based on the feedback. The other thing that I wanted to mention as well, as part of this project towards the end of the process, we will also be creating a guide, so how to use a zoning bylaw guide, which will be very short but very user friendly, and so we can address some of those things, heights, you go to the zone and things like that.
Then can I ask you this? Is it conceivable, let's say in the summary section at the beginning, maybe a chart referencing if you're building this in this zone, this is the height? As I said, I'm trying to think user friendly for people like me who aren't as savvy as all the nuances some might be.
Yeah, so I think through you, Madam Chair, we'll look at that and see what we can do with that feedback, or see if
Just
maybe
that
it
I'll
needs to be presented differently. So
wait
yeah,
for the
we'll take that.
next version. Thank you.
Yeah, but
Thank you,
those are
Madam Chair.
these are good comments. These are the things that we want to hear from.
Okay.
Thank you. And Mark, before we go to Ron, would you like to comment on that too?
Unless Ron wants to speak on building height, I'd be happy. No. I just would say that we will be reviewing the building height details in each of the sections. I just wanted to make the comment that for the most part, I would think that what we have in Cornwall at the various locations within Cornwall complies with what is written in this bylaw. So it's not like we're looking to be more restrictive. There may be some areas, for example, that are Res 30 or Res 40 that are more restrictive, but for the most part, the downtown and the manufacturing zones both allow for 90 feet still yet. It's some of the other zones that have brought that height down a little bit, but again, for the most part, things that are out there right now would comply with what is being proposed here. That doesn't mean though that we're stuck on what's in here. I think it's good to have a conversation about, do we feel that Res 30 should be more than, I believe it's 12 meters or 10 meters. And then Res 40 is proposed, I think, at 13.5 meters. Do we want that to be as it is? Or do we want it to be higher? Those are all good conversations. We're, in a draft bylaw here, and now's the time to have that conversation.
Thank you. And Ron Symington?
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, I just have a comment having to do with this idea of secondary dwellings being new to Cornwall. I think there's quite a few areas in the older sections that it's far from being new, where there's two, and I know of a couple places where there's three dwellings that have been created over many years ago. But having said that, I think tiny homes will probably, I don't think it's going to take off in our area like it would be in the GTA. The question I have deals more with process. And like tonight, the recommended action is that we endorse the first draft. So what exactly are we doing? I assume the questions that are raised tonight and those that have been submitted, they're going to be reviewed by staff and our consultants, and this will be dealt with on the second draft. Is that correct?
Perhaps I'll let Nadia respond to that.
Yes, thank you. Through you, Madam Chair. Sorry, I was just taking notes. So yes, we will be updating the the zoning bylaw with the comments, both the online survey comments, tonight's comments we've received so far, and any others that will come forward before the end of the week. And when we come back, we'll advise as to the changes that have been made or things that maybe we haven't been able to address and the reasons why. So the city does keep a comment tracker of all the comments that that the city receives throughout the process. They're required to do that, and how each of the comments have been addressed. So so the endorsement and the recommendation is to and the wording can be changed, but endorse the first draft and report back or think something like that. But we always show, as part of our community engagement values and principles, is to show how feedback has been received and also how we've addressed those. So that is part of our planning process. We receive comments, but we don't just do what we need to do. We need to advise how we've made those what changes have been made and why.
Thank you.
Okay, so it's really not an approval of the first draft then, because there seems to be a number of issues that people have raised questions on.
Through you, Madam Chair, it's not an approval, it's an endorsement saying we kind of like an acknowledgement of the first draft. There are revisions that are going to have to be made. We even know that there are some things that we have to be made. We have to include the site-specific exceptions in the next draft. So it's sort of I don't know what other word could be used, but sort of like an acceptance of the first draft, but there will be some changes.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you. And are there any other comments? Caroline Bear, and then Justin.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess I just didn't want to leave this meeting without throwing my support behind tiny homes, because I know it seems to be a bit controversial, but I think it's a really great opportunity for us to potentially address the affordable housing crisis in our community. It makes home ownership really accessible to our lower income households or for young people who are struggling right now. So I would be I would not be in support of, just sort of mapping out a part of our community and only allowing tiny homes there. I believe it's quite classist. And so if you can afford a tiny home, you can only live here. You can't live close to our downtown. You can't live close to our amenities. You need to live in this part of the community. So I would fight that as much as possible if that comes up again, because I think if someone is able to purchase a tiny home, build a tiny home, it should be able to be wherever they so choose to want to live. So anyways, so we'll continue to support that. Also very happy with the additions or the amendments in terms of community garden space. I think it's great to see it more encouraged. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. And Justin? Go ahead.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to echo Councillor Hebert's comments on tiny homes. I think realistically, I understand some of the concerns, but it sounds a bit like NIMBYism to me. And I mean, if someone buys a lot and they want to build a home that doesn't take up the entire lot, that's their prerogative. It's their property. They're allowed to do that as long as it meets all building codes. So I'm not exactly against having tiny homes in Riverdale, that sort of thing. I mean, this is an ongoing discussion, but I think we're going to see an uptake on these homes in the city a bit more. I think it's gonna be a bit more popular here than what's anticipated because of the low cost associated with them. So this is something we need to look at and get right. I'd also like to echo Councillor Hollingsworth's concerns about height. I was reading this. Sounds to me, based on what I was reading in terms of maximum height, nothing's really changing. It's still 90 feet. So as you know, I'm a little disappointed in that, but if it's an ongoing discussion, I'll continue that discussion when the time comes. I have a number of notes here, but instead of dragging the meeting on and just for some notes that I think can be answered offline, I'll be sending an email to you, Ms. Smith, with all my points to raise, and I'll wait for an answer offline because some of them are very simple points. So instead of just having 100 questions, I'll do that to save some time. Thank you.
Thank you. Mary Joyce, did you? No, your hand's up.
I'd just like to say that we've received quite a few questions, and I was happy to see that people were taking the time, and I mean, pages and pages of questions we've been answering the last couple of days. So that's positive, I think, and at least they're reading it and they're pointing out what their issues are. So I wanted PAC to know that. So thank you. And thank you, Nadia and your team. You did a great job tonight.
Oh,
Thank you. And
And
I've got one question too, if I may, about tiny homes. Do tiny homes where they occur, are they the primary residence on a lot, or are they often a secondary dwelling, for example, like a granny flat or something like that? Are they usually the second building on a Anita? Okay, go ahead. You're muted still.
Yep, classic unmute. Thanks, Madam Chair. Yeah, I can speak to that. So it would be both cases. So the province does permit tiny homes as a form of an additional residential unit. So there are provisions in the first draft zoning bylaw that would permit an additional residential unit as a detached structure on a lot. So you could conceivably have a tiny home as that additional residential unit, and they could also be the primary dwelling unit where a single detached house is permitted.
Okay, and when they would occur as a secondary residence, is it still, would the land be owned by the primary building on the lot, or would they have a piece of property on that lot in addition to their tiny home? I'm just wondering how the land ownership works.
So I believe it would be under the ownership of the primary dwelling resident or property owner. The zoning bylaw doesn't really get into tenure of dwellings, so it's not necessarily a zoning issue. But if it was under separate ownership, I think they would have to go through a consent process with the PAC and have that approved as a separate lot. So in effect, it would no longer be an additional residential unit on that lot. It would be its own lot.
And
Right.
through you, Madam
Okay.
Chair,
Thank you.
sorry, and just to augment that, consent process, they'd have to meet minimum lot area, lot frontage, all the setback requirements. So
Right. It's
I think
unlikely.
it would be a bit of it's unlikely, yeah.
Yeah, okay, good. And I think, Ron, you have another question?
Find my mute button. Having to do with the granny flats, I was of the understanding that a granny flat would require a temporary use bylaw. No.
So, do you want to handle that, Mary? Or?
At this point, my understanding is that with the accessory uses that are permitted through the with the provincial legislation that's come out, that would be a permitted use. They could use those as accessory uses that in the garage or in our granny suite. That's one way. We haven't typically had. I can't recall. Mark, can you recall if we've had a granny suite situation? I mean, we have garden suites in the bylaw right now. That's so it is a temporary under section 39 of the Planning Act, but I can't recall that kind of a situation in the city. Maybe somebody else can, but.
And I think, Anita, you wanted to speak to that too. And Mark, please.
Sure, yes, through you, Madam Chair. I did want to clarify, the Planning Act allows for garden suites. So, people refer to them as granny flats and other terms, but for example, like the city of Ottawa uses the term coach houses. So you'll hear them being referred to under different terms. The distinction between garden suites under the Planning Act and additional residential units is exactly what Mr. Symington is referring to. It's a temporary use that council approves with a temporary use bylaw up to a maximum of, I believe it's 25 years now, and there is possibility for extension. But that is distinguished from additional residential units, which are permanent residential dwellings on a lot.
And if I might add, through you, Madam Chair, with the garden suites, there has to be an agreement with between the owner of the the garden suites, and the municipality. And once that, whoever is living there, once they decide not to live there, then the use is sort of goes away, kind of thing. So
Okay.
the Planning Act has very specific requirements for garden suites, and that has been reflected in the zoning.
Thank you. And Mark,
Thank you.
did you want to comment on that, Mark?
No, I think it's been very well covered.
Okay, very good. Maurice Dupel?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to say that the presentation tonight was very good. So thank you to the three of you. It's been great. I just want to echo Councillor Hebert and Councillor Towndale's comments regarding tiny houses. I think that we have to have an open mind and a vision that welcomes it to our community, and not just to one area, as Councillor Hebert pointed out, because we want to be seen as an inclusive community and not a segregated community. So thank you.
Thank you for that. Are there any other comments? Amanda? Go
Hey,
ahead.
everyone. I just wanted to, I have a little bit of experience, obviously, in this sort of tiny house situation, and I've had some experience with it outside of our community. So I've had the opportunity in the past to sell a few of them. And I don't know that it'll be something that will be accessible here in Cornwall, because in other communities, the rules surrounding them is really intense. And I think it will be here too. We have fairly tight lots within our city limits and not a lot of land. There's not a lot of land up for grabs right now in Cornwall, so at least in this center town kind of area. So I don't know that it's going to be something we're going to see a lot of it happening, but I think we will see it a little bit on the outskirts, and maybe with some of those people with a little bit more land.
Thank you. We'll wait and see. So the endorsement has been moved and seconded. I'll call the vote. All in favor? And Ellie, was that a long enough hold for you? No, so please put your hands up again and maybe leave them up until Ellie gives us the nod.
So, okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you. Moving on, there are no public meeting items. So on to other business, CPAG recommendations. I'll turn it over to Dana to walk us through these, please.
I'm just going to ask Ellie to put up the slides to share her screen and for the presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm doing that right now. Thanks, Nadia, Anita, and Casper.
Yes, big thanks.
Thank you all
very
much
much. And
everyone.
yes, thank you. Thank you for your comments, and to all of you for taking the time to read the document and giving us feedback. So thank you. Have a lovely week.
Thank you.
Good
You
night.
too.
We'll see you
next
again.
time.
Take care.
Good night.
Okay, Dana, I made you co-host, and I'll try to get that presentation up. Oh, yep. I'm here. Go here.
Perfect. Great.
Perfect. Okay,
Yeah.
good.
Okay, if you just want to go to the next slide. So the first application at the February meeting was for 150 Pitt Street, but this is actually two properties, 150 Pitt and 26 2nd Street West. So 26 2nd Street West is the Cornwall Bingo Center, and they had previously used some funding to do some renovations to the interior of that building. So if you want to go to the next slide. So the remaining amount available to them under program 2 is just $21,750, and then they'll be applying for the remainder of the funding for that. They're going to be doing major renovations to Bicycle World. If you want to flip to the next slide. So this actually has a second floor. They're not going to be doing the renovations on the second floor at this point, but they'll be redoing all of the front of the building as well as the interior. There's a possibility of between 2 to 3 commercial units for this property. Okay. And then this is just the view of the parking lot that's associated with that property at linked to 26 2nd Street West. The city had been previously leasing this property and the bus shelter is located on there. Okay, next slide. The next application is for 134 Montreal Road. You may recall that we had an application for this property previously. Rothmar Holdings had purchased the property. It was a commercial insurance sales. There was 2 residential units associated with it, and they converted it all to residential. If you want to flip. So the new owners that have purchased this property, not all of the renovations were finished, so they're asking for $3,000 to finish off part of the renovations with regards to air conditioning. These were commercial units, so some of them don't have open windows at this time. So there was a requirement for heat recovery units, ventilation, and they're putting in air conditioning. Okay, next slide. And this is just, I took some pictures. I went through all of the building to see the new units. And as you can tell, since they were commercial units, the ceiling heights are quite high. So this is the commercial or the residential unit that is right on the front street with the 3 commercial windows in the front. And then this is the kitchen, living area. Next slide. And large bedroom and washroom for this unit. There is another bedroom as well, but I didn't show that photo.
Nope.
All of the units are primarily the same, looking the same type of flooring, and all new you know, units associated with it. Okay. The next application is an addendum application for 217 Pitt Street, which is Oasis Day Spa. Okay, and they're going to be applying for, you can flip, Ellie, the design funding because they're going to be looking at redoing their facade at this time. So right now they're meeting with designers in order to get a concept and the type of drawings that they're going to need to submit for building permits. So next slide has a picture of what it looks like right now. So it's right next to the corner on Pitt and 2nd. Okay, next slide. The last application is for 780 Sydney Street. They had actually started this application of February in 2020 and then put it on hold due to COVID. So as you do recall, this is the Wesleyan Church, and they sold the south portion of their property to Miller Hughes Ford. So because of that, they are required to change their parking area and provide their own catch basin on this. And at that time, they were also looking at providing accessibility ramp to the south side of their building from the parking lot to get in. So they're applying for the design fee grant for this. They will be subject to site plan control, and I believe that's almost complete. Since they are outside of the priority area, CPEG did recommend that it's 50% of the original program. So let's say they're applying for $4,000 with a grant. CPEG has applied for recommended for approval $2,000, as well as the other fees. And then there's, I think, one more photo, and that's just the street view of the Wesleyan Church and the parking lot in their area. If there's any questions. Oh, I did have the site plan provided for you as well.
Thank you. So are there questions?
You can take down the
Ellie,
slides if you want, Ellie. That way.
Sorry.
yeah, so
Just
we can
trying
see
We can see
everybody.
everybody.
Yep, just bear with me for a second.
That's
Sure.
okay.
Just trying to get, yep. Just hear me? Yep. So no, I just want everybody back. Oh, there. Yeah, Amanda has a question. Maybe this one right here.
You should be able to select unshare your screen at the bottom.
Okay. There we
Very
go.
good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for
So-
bearing.
So Amanda? and
I do.
then Dean?
I have, I guess I have a question. I'm not sure who would answer it. Maybe it's just clarification. I need to understand again why, when they're out of the heart of the city, it drops to 50%. I just need to understand that again.
Okay, so within there is a full policy area that goes from Brookdale to 9th down around McConnell and then more or less to the water, and it catches in a little bit of 2nd Street east. So, and then we have a priority area. So the priority area is in the CBD district, which is the center of downtown. Then it links along Water Street to Le Village, which is the commercial 70 zone. So those are the two areas that we've considered to be the priority area. And because of we only have a certain amount of funding, anything outside of that, depending on the project, again, the committee was recommending 50%. In the case of the Wesleyan Church, it could be also, when you're looking at just a parking area, it isn't going to provide new assessment to the building. It is going to enhance the building, but it's not going to provide new assessment.
Great. Thank you.
Good. Are there other questions? I see none, and Dana presented all 4 properties as one show. So I'm assuming that nobody wants to pull any particular property out for discussion. So I'll ask for, or Maurice, go ahead.
Oh, Maurice,
You're
you
still
have your mute
muted,
on.
sorry.
Sorry, Madam Chair, thank you. The first property that was presented to us says that it's going to be 4 commercial retail spaces. So they're going to change what's already there at Bicycle World?
Correct. But it won't be 4 in that one space. So you have the Bingo Palace, which counts as 1, and then Bicycle World, which is the other one. The space there is quite significant. So the new owner is considering doing renovations. Now, it's still up to Bicycle World. Should they feel that they want to rent the complete space, that is still an option.
All right, so then the current tenant they'll be offered the choice.
Absolutely.
So then if they decided that they're just going to keep the main level, then they'll renovate the lower level?
No, well, most of the renovations are going to be done on the front facade. So if you've ever gone by Bicycle World in this type of weather, you can't see into their windows anymore because the frost is so thick. So they will be changing all of that exterior to new commercial glass and a new entrance.
All right, so what would that look like for Bicycle World if they said no? Like if they wanted to, if they said we don't want another, or if we want another tenant, so would that mean the space would be cut in half, or?
Yes, so depending on what the square footage is of their current tenancy, whether that rent increases, and if they were agreeable to pay the new rent, they would lease all of that space. Otherwise, it could be split, I think, easily in half. If you're familiar with Cab Boutique across the way,
yes,
there were connections inside, but then there was also two doors, 2 separate front doors. So the same, I think, could happen in this location. Bicycle World does have 2 double doors at this point, so I don't think it would be very difficult to split.
No, and it's a large location.
Mm-hmm.
The location that we're speaking about is a large location. I think they even have a lower level.
They do. Okay. Mainly used for storage.
Right. So when you say 4 tenants, so one would be the bingo center?
Just 2, maximum 3. Yeah.
Maximum 3. Okay, perfect. Thank you very much, Dana.
You're welcome.
Are there any others? Seeing none, then I'll ask for a motion to comply with the recommendations. Maurice, seconded by Amanda. Or is that a question, Amanda, or you're seconding? Okay. All in favor? Thank you.
Terrific, thank you.
So, information, very little. Our next scheduled meeting will be held on Monday, March 15th, or at the call of the chair, if we have Mary Joyce.
Chair, sorry, to date, we do not have a public meeting item that will be advertised in the paper this Saturday, so I do not know if there'll be a March PAC at this point.
Okay, and I'm sure you'll let us know.
Yes, I will.
So could I have a motion to adjourn then, please? Maurice, seconded by Carrie Lynn. All in favor? Thank you and good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Good night.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
And Ellie, you did a great job.
Thanks. I had a bit of help with Kevin. Thank you.
It's okay.
Yes. And Madam Mayor, I need to apologize for being late. I got home from work late, so I was a few minutes late. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.